Hi everyone, I'm Dierdre Breakenridge, CEO of Pure Performance Communications. Welcome to the Nasdaq PR Influencer Series. We're live in Times Square, New York City, and I'm here with Steve Rubel. He's the Chief Content Strategist at Edelman, the largest PR agency in the world, and Steve is known as a storytelling genius. Steve, welcome.
Thank you. I mean, that's an honor. I don't know if that's really true, but okay.
Well, you're the consummate storyteller. I know I saw that somewhere. So, and I know you've done tremendous blogging in your past.
In the way past, yeah.
Yeah, in the way past. So, and you were helping companies with their blogs a long, long time ago.
Long time ago.
But fast forward to the future, and there's so much going on with storytelling and content. How long have you been at Edelman, first off?
Over 11 years.
Okay, so you are in the agency environment, and we all know that we have to morph and grow and tell a new story. So maybe you could just share from the agency perspective, or your perspective as an innovator, what's the state of content?
Well, that's a big topic. Content used to be in the hands of a few, professional creators, whether it be the media community or the advertising community, the entertainment community, and now it's been, over the last 10, 12, 15 years, because of the internet, it's been completely democratized. And that's created tremendous disruption. Obviously, there's also been a number of channels that really are democratizing that for us, including, Facebook, which obviously is powering this entire experience here. So the brands, I think, now more than ever feel empowered to tell their own story in their own voice and their own style, and to be able to kind of cultivate an audience the same way a media property would. And that is an exciting time. So the state of content really is it's a jump ball for almost everybody. And that includes agencies. It includes professional content creators, influencers of all walks. So it's a unique time where it's been democratized, but not everyone's going to succeed.
Exactly. So your role specifically is really interesting because it appears that you're sort of learning about the content, being innovative, and then bringing that into the agency. So when you do that, or is your agency testing and exploring? What is that like inside?
So my role specifically, so just a brief bit of background on us, is that we have 6,000 people in something like 50-something, I lost track, 60 offices worldwide. And we're the largest player in communications, as you mentioned. And we're family-run and independent as a firm, which is kind of unique because a lot of our largest competitors are part of holding companies. Mm-hmm. My entire job, so as a family company, the CEO of our firm, Richard Edelman, kind of is, does some things that are a little bit different than other firms do, and he has me specifically trying to see around corners to kind of understand how consumption is changing, how distribution is changing, how production is changing, and to kind of extract what those learnings are, bring it back, and help, first and foremost, network our entire team understand kind of what the implications are for how they do their job, and to help the clients kind of see their opportunities as storytellers, whether it be how we look at the media in a different way, how we look at professional content, their own content in their own way, and to really look at the total dynamic. So the role that I have is kind of a third research, kind of a third or more seeing clients and kind of helping evangelize what we think are changes they need to be knowing about and thinking about, whether that's at a communication officer level or at a CMO level often. And then I have a role like this, which is kind of doing external visibility and thought leadership for the company. So it's a really unique position. But my job is to kind of help kind of see what's happening outside, and there's a lot going on. So I don't know if I'm answering your question or not.
You absolutely did. So if you were around every corner and your job is to see what's happening, what would you say are the biggest trends in content now, but what's going to stick? Because we see things that happen and then they fizzle out.
Yep.
Everybody jumps on a bandwagon or a shiny object. So what are the trends and what's going into 2018?
Well, the big trend, the big one, is that in the U.S., 60% of all time spent with media is on a mobile device, and rising. The average person uses 5 apps on a regular basis, and those numbers come from ComScore. Those 5 apps are largely controlled by 2 companies, and a third trying to edge their way in. And the two companies are Google and Facebook, and Snapchat's trying to make a run at being the third. So they also, Google and Facebook, control roughly 80% of all digital ad spend in the United States as well, and they're considered a duopoly. So the big trend is that content is absolutely infinite, proliferating, more and more creators, whether it's influencers, media companies, businesses, but the distribution points and the funnel is really down to two players and maybe a third. So, and those are algorithmically driven, they're social driven, and so the grand challenge of our time is how do we make sure that we are trying to be as visible on those platforms as possible. And it's not just publishing, it's about understanding the psychology, it's about how you leverage in media buying, it's about styles of content, it's about how you work together with different partners for scale. But that's kind of one of the grand challenges in communications is the fact that those two companies, and maybe a third, control the vast majority of distribution.
There's a lot of challenges and a lot of change, just what you mentioned. So how do you think, with this mix of media, because basically that's what it's come down to when you want to tell a story, typically public relations professionals were very, very used to earned media and super comfortable with it. Now we know that we have expanded and there's this mix of media, the earned, the paid, the shared, the owned. How do you think, two-part question, how are PR professionals doing embracing this mix? And also on the other side, clients, do they expect your agency to have the mix, or are you educating them?
So I think that the PR community is doing well in embracing kind of a bigger remit beyond just kind of media relations, which has been the core, and it's still a big, huge part of what we do. It's more and more about kind of content and going direct to audience. I mean, the number of newsrooms in the world have shrunk, unfortunately, and new players have emerged that have kind of figured out how to do that in a better way through social. If you look at, say, BuzzFeed or Vox Media, just name two. So I think the PR community is starting to understand that content is much more kind of the seed of what they do, whether it be going directly to an audience or going through, using kind of own content to drive an earned conversation. The clients, it's a little bit, so I think the agency community has grasped it. The clients, I think, have also grasped it, but there it's a little bit of a challenge because who owns that in a client organization is sometimes difficult. Content is a very broad topic. There are creative agencies and CMOs and marketers that have been doing that for years. And so now communications professionals want to have some sort of ownership of that, as they should. So that really varies depending on the organization. It depends on where content sits. Sometimes I've seen it as a layer where there's a shared resource that everyone has access to, whether it's an agency resource or it's an internal resource that everyone has access to, and then it's dialed up in different formats. So if it's owned, it might be controlled by communications. If it's paid, it might be controlled by marketing. But more and more what we're seeing is across the industry, people really understand that original content is the seed of paid programming, and it has been for years, and it's now becoming the seed of earned programming, and that's new.
That's really interesting. And I think that on your client side or the brand side, that they are coming along as well, and hopefully silos are breaking down and folks are working together.
And there's silos in agencies too. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's swim lanes, and those are being broken up. But the industry that the business world, no longer is now cookie cutter. You have everybody getting into everyone else's space. I mean, Facebook is. There was a survey done that a large percentage of people think that Facebook is a news company because that's where they get their news. So it's very hard to kind of define things in very finite buckets in a digital age. And that includes roles and responsibilities within an organization, but also the agency swim lanes as well, as we call them.
Right. Well, I remember seeing a study saying that if you were to ask a millennial where they get their news, they at one time had said Facebook. So, or now maybe it's Twitter, who knows?
Or it's Snapchat.
Or
right?
Snapchat. I did want to ask a question because you mentioned Snapchat. Are you finding is that something that a lot of brands are asking for or inquiring about? Should we be on Snapchat?
I think there's always a get me one of those, or gamoot, as a writer once called it, philosophy, to say, I want that. I think they're always very curious about new channels, but we encourage them to think about where their audience is and what the interest graph is, and what's going to be the psychological payoff for them. Because increasingly, so if something's not shared, it's not seen. So we're looking at which are the right channels to do that based on where the audience is, and so sometimes it is Snapchat, depending on the audience, but it's really broad. But it's to me, the phone is not, the channels are not the end, is not the only game in town. It's the psychology and understanding, where the consumer is spending time, and so sometimes they are asking for Snapchat strategies for sure, and they're asking for what's next, but at times they overlook what's current.
Exactly. Well, that's where you can educate them. So I have to ask a measurement question, because that's how we need to round out the discussion. Nasdaq recently did a CCO measurement survey. So 100 chief communications officers participated, and 57% stated that they are accountable for content marketing, which maybe years ago you would not have seen over 50%. So in terms of measuring, a lot of the work that we're doing to learn and the psychology, do you think that companies are where they need to be with their measurement of their content?
I don't think so yet. No, I think measurement is still an open game, and a lot of people are looking at measurement from an outdated model. We're looking at it from a reach and frequency perspective. How many people did I reach, and how many times did I reach them? That worked when there were a finite number of choices.
Yes.
And finite number of outlets. When you have, so the overall pie has gotten bigger, but the slices of the pie have gotten much smaller. So it's not an apples to apples comparison anymore the way, TV buying is. And even that's happened in television as well. So one way we're looking at measurement is about prestige. And did the content spark a conversation? Did it, somehow create a new idea? Did it get recognized by a lot of people? Did it earn attention? And another is we're looking at, did it reach a finite group of people? Because if you're able to kind of build a relationship with people, we've seen that people will buy from you much more often. And so one way to look at content and measurement is, was it consumed by a small number of people more often? Because then you're building a deeper relationship with that community that has the power to generate word of mouth much more broadly. So I think there's new ways of looking at measurement, and it's not enough just to think about the numbers that Facebook gives you or this idea of reach and frequency, but to really look at about engagement and depth of relationship. And then prestige is another one.
That's really interesting. I think that is an excellent way to look at measurement.
Not everyone's there yet.
No, not everybody's there. Yeah,
reach and frequency are still
big.
That's the culture.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess for PR professionals who want to be up to date with what's new in content and what's new in media, what advice can you share, or resources, or what would you say to them?
Well, I think you have to follow what's happening on the platforms, and you have to follow how the publishing community broadly is reacting to that. And when I say the publishing community, I mean not just the media companies, but I mean the brand publishers and the influencer community. The influencers do a really good job of reacting. So it's really important to kind of track this intersection of technology and media. Where I do that, personally, is on Twitter. And I follow 2 accounts and a third that I think is really interesting. That's kind of a crossover. So one account is called TechMeme, TechMeme, and they tell you everything that's happening in technology today. And I find that's a great kind of aggregator feed of what's happening in technology. They have a sister feed called Media Gazer, and it's at Media Gazer, and they track all the developments in the media business. And then there's a third that I track that's just a huge fire hose of content that's at Media Redef, R-E-D-E-F. And Jason Hirschhorn, who was the former CEO of MySpace and has had a long history in the media community, has built this kind of curation engine that is just feeding out lots of different stories. So those 3 I find, plus I follow a whole list of people. Twitter lists are ways that I stay up to date, but I also make sure I get out there and talk to people. And I do that as a big part of my job, to kind of hear firsthand, to be able to ask questions. And the best advice I can offer is you got to be asking the right questions, because if you're asking the wrong questions, you're going to get back the wrong answers.
Steve, that was great advice. I made a mental note.
Okay, yeah, well, we can
that
send
you're
this out,
following.
so.
I might be emailing you later.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Or DMing you.
Yeah, of course. I usually retweet a lot of their links, so you'll see it on my feed.
I hope everybody wrote that down and they're now following those 3 resources.
Those are 3 of the best.
Very good. Okay, so I know it's hard to make a prediction.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Oh,
The Jets
if you
will win the
can.
Super Bowl. Can we pray? Can everyone say a prayer?
Okay, I'll say a prayer for you. I'm not a Jets fan, but I'm going to say a prayer for you.
Good.
So
you're better off.
What's next? What should we be keeping our eyes on?
What's next? Boy, that's
It's hard.
that's a tough question. Well, I think the thing that's really happening is that there's a complete, well, trust is a huge topic, right? Trust overall, and what we've seen in our data is that trust in institutions across the board has been going down. But there are huge trust issues in the media buying supply chain, which is a really arcane, geeky topic. What that means is that there's in some cases mistrust in media buying agencies. In other cases, there's trust in the platforms and how they measure the delivery of ads in the feed. There's been some questions about that. So that's a really disruptive, transformational opportunity, because what's going to happen now is that all this money that's going into media buying, into especially what's called programmatic media buying or automated media buying, which was a sure bet for a lot of people for a long time, is being looked at differently. Because in some cases, I mean, the ANA projects that only 30% of all money spent in digital advertising ever reaches the consumer. So what's next is that money's going to move. And where does that money go? Well, does Facebook and Google fix some of their problems and it goes back to them? Could. Does the money move back into TV? It could. But does the money move elsewhere? Does the money move into branded content? Does it move into more precision media buying? Does it move into earned communications? And that money and how that moves is an important thing to watch because it dictates everything else.
I'm going to be watching that. That is excellent.
Big story. Follow the money, right?
Definitely.
Not a new idea.
Right.
Follow the money.
And you know what? And the trust issue. What a way to end an interview.
But trust,
on
it's
trust.
broad, which is another huge topic. But
Yeah.
trust specifically in what's called the media buying supply chain, and the things that the ANA, the Association of National Advertisers, has been writing about this is really worth watching.
Excellent. Last question, and so easy. Where can people find out more about you, your work, and Edelman?
Well, Edelman.com, and Edelman PR on Twitter, and Edelman, I think, on Instagram, and Edelman on Facebook. That's easy. And in my case, best place to follow me is on Twitter, because that's kind of my home base, and it's at Steve Rubel, SteveRubel.
Excellent. Steve, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us, for chatting.
Thanks, Dierdre.
Excellent insights, and thank you to all of you for tuning in to the Nasdaq PR Influencer Series. Stay tuned for more from Nasdaq.